Welcome to the Digital Government Podcast. Tune in to discover the future of governance and ways of getting there.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Digital Government Podcast with your usual host, Federico Plantera, journalist, sociologist, and researcher. Today, accompanied for, I would say, another one of the installments of the times and the series when we talk about digital leadership. Today, with Ingrid Tonekurg. Ingrid is a new member of the management board at eGovernance Academy. And so this is a welcome to the Digital Government Podcast, but also in a way, a welcome to eGovernance Academy. So, ciao, Ingrid.
Ciao, Federica. Nice to be here.
A little introduction for everyone, me included, actually, to a certain extent, to you and to your profile. As I said, you're a member of the management board at eGovernance Academy, and indeed, today we will talk exactly about the topic of leadership and managing teams, and at the same time, teams across countries and in multicultural business contexts. Why are we talking about that with you? Because in your work path so far, for example, there is a lengthy experience at Microsoft as a sales manager in more than 25 countries. At the same time, before, still in IT, you have experience from IBM, again, software sales manager. But before these two experiences, no, who was, let's say, Ingrid Tonekurg before these sales management positions?
Before being the sales manager at those IT companies, I also worked in a university, in a private university, which was also international. And before that, I was part of a project in the Ministry of Finance from the EU FARE, which means, of course, international consultants, about setting up the treasury for the Estonian government. So I've almost had no day in my life when it's not international or has to do with someone else from some other culture or not speaking English or something like this. So it's good. I like being international. And this has been since my early childhood, even though I am still from that generation that was not allowed to travel abroad. But as soon as the border started opening up, my dad already had friends, in Finland, and we went to visit them, and they came to us. So for me, this is kind of a natural habitat to be around such people. Both of my parents are teachers or professors. My dad taught me a lot about how to learn and how to learn through argumentation and how to argue without hitting the person. That hit the ball, not the person.
Hit the ball, not the person. Very valuable advice that I would say definitely can come from football as well. And obviously, as a Southern Italian, I have to point this out. But aside from this, from the things that you mentioned from before, let's say, in your career before the corporate jobs, let's say, you have mentioned exactly education, and you've mentioned also public sector. So how was it for you in hindsight, let's say, in retrospective a little bit, to not only navigate across borders with the people that you had to deal with and also that you had to manage, but also to navigate across sectors? Like, how did you find your way through it? What did you, if you felt at all, let's say, anything that maybe you had to change, let's say, from one sector to another, and something that instead had to remain and that you thought it was something reapplicable?
I can't say it's too different from a sector or industry or in that way, because where I've always found the strength is working with people who are smart, who know their area, and then it's kind of agnostic to the industry or sector, because in every area there are, some businesses are faster, some are slower, some governments are faster, some are slower. So this has to do, I think, more with the people rather than the sectors.
And since you're talking about people, you're actually going directly into something that I thought of asking you, based exactly on this past experience and the fact that people are also, especially when it comes to public service delivery, for example, at the receiving end of a chain, let's say, of developing, designing, and then ultimately making available public services. In a very similar way, for example, in the private sector, when you have to lead teams in sales, we are talking about the receiving end being customers. No, so some in this sense, is there any change, let's say, that you have already noticed or thought about, or that you are envisioning, let's say, in the way that we talk about people when we refer to them as citizens in public sector delivery, or as customers, let's say, in a private sector type of environment?
There is a big parallel among between them. What you need to keep in mind is that either of these groups is the end user of something, and it should be based on their needs, and it should benefit them. So whether it's citizens through government services, or whether it's customers, and also the employees of the customers. A business customer is not just a strange unit. You have people who will be using whatever digital solution they will receive. So in that sense, there is not that much. Of course, the business users are probably more defined in their scope, but as a citizen you need a lot of different kinds of services.
Yeah, because this is actually also connected to another topic that we have explored in last year's e-governance conference, for example, which was exactly how, when we talk about designing public services, for example, we can't really narrow down the designing and the delivery also of public services to specific personas, because exactly when we're talking about public services, we're talking about things that need to be usable for the most, not just for the many in society, but for the most. And in this sense, it takes us to think with the users and also to get closer to the users, no? Especially when it comes to public service delivery. A little bit instead about your personal experience in the sense in the private sector, just to, let's say, draw a few connections. And what I would like to ask you is exactly that you have said that it's very important for you to feel close to the customers, no, and like to be close to the customers. So how did that, for example, take shape, or how did that look like in your personal work experience so far in the private sector? What did it mean to be close to customers for you?
So for me, it means being close to the customers means to listen to them and understand their needs, and maybe try to think together if they don't yet know what they need. You're referring to me working with private customers, but actually I was working all the time also with governments and with public sector. So yeah, as I was representing a private company as Microsoft is or IBM, but actually the customers were always from all sectors or all industries. So I like to meet people. I like to see how they react, what they think, if they can describe what they need, because this is where the truth really comes out from. And sometimes the situation was that, okay, the company has an idea that we want to improve some kind of a system, and then when you talk with those people who are in that department or in that function, and they're saying, no, 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 we don't actually need that. We would actually benefit much more from a entirely different approach. And this is what I mean, being close to the customer. That sometimes if you go even from outside, you can get closer to the person or role who needs something. You just need to ask. You need to kind of investigate in a good way, what would be beneficial.
Do you think that maybe, and I will say, I will put it from a more like collective perspective. Do you think that a little bit collectively at the moment we are sometimes missing this part of the equation in terms of designing and delivering public services? Meaning, in more, how to say, like ground terms, let's say, is maybe sometimes government in general as an entity a little bit distant, let's say, from the people in understanding their needs, and as a consequence we need to listen more? What is your opinion on that? What have you observed?
To be honest, in Estonia, I am very happy with a lot of the services that I get as a citizen, as a business person, as a mother, as a as a daughter, helping my parents, for instance. So I think Estonia has done a really good job of different digital services. So I don't know if someone has been listening or thinking a lot, but it's good. Yeah, I think that governments are not the same all over the world, and some are maybe doing a better job and some not. And definitely, it's maybe it takes a bit of time to get feedback from the citizens what they need, and do they even know what they need? Often they do, but not always. And then the question is if the government actually listens or reacts to those needs. Uh, yeah, I think it can be improved definitely in many cases.
I mean, this is related to the topic of listening, and like to listening to the needs and of both like customers and citizens, and listening to people and dealing with people is something that somehow has been a little bit of a common denominator, a fil rouge, so to say, in your career and your work path. What do I mean with this is that before the corporate job postings, before the government work spell, and even before education, you actually also had a bit of a spell as a bartender.
Yeah, being a bartender was it was a short time, but it was very cool job, I would say. I mean, you have to listen to what people want. The other thing is that people come to relax and they start talking and they tell all kinds of interesting stories. I heard a lot of life experiences. I've told my kids as well that I would really like them to have, at least at some point in life, a service job. It teaches you a lot of understanding and empathy.
Exactly, because there are many of these, job experiences that we might have had in the past that do teach things that stick. In your experience, what is something that you have been that has been, let's say, a learning for your own self as well, in terms of how to coherently and seamlessly manage teams towards getting to a certain goal? Because I think that that becomes pretty evident in the field of sales as well, no?
You're right. Nothing can be done alone, always with a team. And it doesn't need to be that these people are always in one team. They can be virtual teams, like in a sales situation or a consultancy situation. The teams change every once in a while. Um, what is the most important for everybody understand or practice actually is always assume the best intentions from the other side, because then you can solve topics, you can argue in a much safer, securer environment. If you assume best intentions, then this will take you a long way into understanding the other's position. And I think this is one of the reasons why I like meeting people either face to face or at least see them, because this helps to read the people. Uh, I'm sure you've had situations where you get an email and you're already in a bad mood, and the tone that you're reading this, and maybe you had a slight argument with the person who sent it, and you read this email like, "Ah, that person, how could she?" and and you kind of you wire yourself super up, and then when you read this at a different day or with a different tone, or maybe it exercises to use it to read it with a smile and understand that maybe this person, actually there is nothing in the words, but you imagine a tone from yourself. So yeah, I think always assume best intentions goes a long way in team building and understanding. I've had the I have the ultimate pleasure and honor to work with super smart people, people are really smart, and most people are very motivated to do things. Usually, when it can go wrong is either team dynamics or something that's not easy to point your finger at. So there I see as the role of a leader to kind of make the team a whole again, or like make people work together.
Wow, I think you gave the best example of the reading of the email. First of all, because I would have to say, this topic of assuming people's intentions first in a good way and then let eventually facts or other actions, let's say, prove you wrong on that,
Hmm.
is definitely something that I've been like personally like reflecting on, let's say, in the past year or so. For and we did not even speak about this before, so audience members, like, you can be reassured that I was just nodding without saying anything in front of the microphone, and at the same time, instead, yeah, I would say that exactly, like, a good manager probably needs to do also that, which is not just, let's say, to set goals or to set strategy or to set plans, but also to care for the overall well-being, let's say, of the team, and
Exactly.
the overall dynamics in the team of how people work with each other. How people work with each other, which you have made example of the email, but you have also mentioned, for example, the fact that teams often, especially now, during after the pandemic, but also just in general when it comes to international teams, they do often work virtually with each other. They have team members that they see mostly, let's say, through a screen, or like during let's say, working hours and working times. And I would say that probably another aspect connected to this is also that maybe the leader and the manager, the good manager and the good leader, should also make sure that people don't reduce, let's say, the perception or the idea that they have of a person, that they're working with, to the email or to the screen or to the moment of calling that they're having, but exactly take into account that an email could be read in the wrong way simply for another reason that is not personally connected to them, or that is not maybe necessarily work related. And this is something that increases in complexity when there is also an element of multiplicity of cultures within teams, no? And that's exactly the point that we were mentioning before of the international teams. So again, we're talking about digital leadership through talking about, personal experiences that sort of like most of us have had in the past couple of years. So this is not a topic exactly that it's only for leaders or managers, but it's a topic as well for us, let's say, or like people working with leaders or managers or under leaders or managers, to understand exactly the rationale behind like certain decisions and certain things that are said in a certain way. In your Microsoft experience, indeed, you do have worked across 20, 25 countries, if not even more, I think. So, something that I would ask you from that is actually connected to, I mean, you have said already that it's been a pleasure to work with so many interesting and smart people across countries, and to have had this human capital, let's say, like at you, in your hands, like then to be able to actually do things with them to achieve certain goals. This is something that, in any case, you have also explored a bit, let's say, in your research times in academia and in university. Because indeed, one of the things that I have not mentioned, but that you have hinted at, is that you have done the previous research into business cultures in general. So, like, not just the culture of doing business, like situated in a single country, but multiple cultures of doing business, as far as I understood. So, is there anything that you saw throughout your international experience, let's say, on this field and leading teams, that was exactly as you had envisioned it and imagined it while you were writing and researching? Or there were also, let's say, some things that did surprise you in terms of business culture from culture to culture?
My research was about how cultures affect international business. And I was largely basing it on Gerd Hofstede, who had researched and done a lot of analysis and a lot of questionnaires country by country. I've seen that this very often holds true. when we talk about how power distance plays between the people. If you can say hello to a manager's manager without having to bow before them or not, and there's nothing wrong with that. It is that particular culture. But what I've seen that, yes, Gert Hofstede was quite spot on with a lot of the things that he was measuring, and a lot of uh, the conclusions that he made about cultures. What I find a bit different is that, as that research was done quite a while ago, and I know that it is updated every once in a while, but uh, it's people are becoming more, I don't want to say global, but they see the world more. And then this kind of melts a little bit. So the ages are kind of softer of some cultures, and you can see some are more conservative, some are more liberal. It also goes for diversity. Being a woman manager in certain cultures, well, it took me a little bit of time to gain trust among certain customers, because they perceived it in a different way. But then again, assume best intentions, and understand the people's culture, and have also a good guide of the culture, or a good reference person, a local person who can explain things, or that you can introduce you, or lead the discussion to a certain place. So yes, it's true that there are different cultures, and they affect the business as well. uh, but also, people are becoming a little bit more similar, maybe a bit more understanding, or maybe switching on the similarity modes in an international business or work.
And I would say that that happens also because of the thing that you mentioned, because of the perception, or better, like an increased perception of proximity with the people that they're working with, even if they are extremely distant in geographical terms or in cultural terms. Meaning, even just for example, the fact of having to get used to working online and to working with teams and to working across borders, which are all, let's say, byproducts of how more global and globalized, uh, not just the economy but also simply the way that we communicate becomes, then that does actually get us closer a little bit, and also at the same time create the ground, for some commonalities or similarities to come up that maybe before we did not even think of. But this obviously leads us to sort of like the last question that I would ask you to wrap up this podcast episode. Ingrid, at this point, we've talked about your personal experience, and through your personal experience, we have drawn a little portrait essentially of certain things that do enable leaders and teams to work successfully towards a certain goal and to achieve certain goals. What would you say if now we were to sum up, let's say, to do a little, not a little listicle, but just to mention some things that definitely team leaders or anyone aiming to achieve something together with other teams, what are, let's say, these like main learnings that people can apply and that do make teams go forward?
Mhm. So one, yeah, we said best intentions, be aware of certain cultural differences. But it's not only the culture, it's also that inside one culture or a nation, there are different types of people. So when I think of diversity more than anything, I think that the everybody should listen also to the more quiet people. You need to ask them, because usually we hear the loudest person who speaks, who always speaks up, and that opinion is definitely very valid. But in order to make the best decision, you also have to ask them more quiet team members. And this is something, when you build a team, it has to be diverse. And by diversity, I mean these different personal traits. Some are more analytical, some are more communicative. They're all good if you make them work together for a common goal.
Leadership, digital leadership, today with Ingrid Tonekurg. Thanks a lot for joining us today in this episode of the podcast.
Thank you very much, Federico, and hope to see you soon in Estonia.
Exactly, perfect hook for for allowing us to state once again that yes, in May, from May 21st to May 23rd in Tartu, and also online, there is the e-governance conference 2024 happening, which we have already introduced, and we will keep introducing in the next episodes of the Digital Government Podcast, featuring also speakers that you from the audience and also us, we will very likely be able to see on stage, as I said, either in person in Tartu or online, where you can go also to 2024.egovconference.e and check the tickets, check the panels, check the speakers, check the program, and also the place where the conference is happening, which is Tartu, especially for this year. That's it from us, and that's it also from your host for today's episode of the Digital Government Podcast. And have a nice day, and I hope to see you all at the next one.
This podcast is brought to you by the eGovernance Academy. Tune in next time.